The most dangerous settings in Argo CD. We're going to be talking about that today, along with stories from the trenches using Argo CD from Argo CD 1.0 until now with Victor C on today's very special episode of Argo Unpacked. I am your host, Dan Garfield. I am a Argo CD maintainer, as well as the co-founder of a company called CodeFresh, now part of Octopus Deploy, where we help people adopt GitOps, Argo, and lots more. But today we're going to be talking about everything going on in the world of Argo. And I teased at the very beginning of this that we're going to be talking about the most dangerous settings in Argo CD. So we're going to get to that in a second. We'll cover some news really quick. And then after we cover the segment on the most dangerous settings in Argo CD, we're going to invite Victor C to come in and talk with us about starting from scratch. This is somebody who started using Argo CD at 1.0 or right before 1.0 and has jumped in from the very beginning and their journey until now. And so we're going to do some stories from the trenches, bit of a case study, if you will. So join us now. Get out your drinks. get your comments ready. Love to have the feedback and discussion while we're having the episode going on live. If you're tuning in for the recording, then strap in, because this is Argo Unpacked. Now, first off, some news that we need to cover and let you know about. We've got a lot of things going on in the world of Argo. Always, that's why we do this show by every other week. First up, KubeCon Atlanta is coming up in November. ArgoCon Atlanta is going to be there, ArgoCon North America, and we have a packed schedule full of really great talks, great speakers. If you haven't registered yet, go register. We want to see you there. I'll be there. Happy to hang out with you and chat and hear your stories. Maybe there'll be an opportunity to share your story on this show. So make sure to go to KubeCon Atlanta and get registered for that if you haven't already. And then another piece of news in the world of Argo CD was this week we upgraded to Redis 8 version 8. Now we've actually been slow on the upgrade on the Redis version because of that whole license kerfuffle that happened with Redis. Redis 8 is back on a has a dual license thing that is a little bit more palatable for most people. But the real issue is that because we were rocking Argo in Argo CD, I think it was Redis 6. I think we jumped for 7 and now we're going to 8. There were just like CVEs in old versions of Redis, and we weren't going to ship old versions of Redis. There was a lot of discussion about if the license was compatible, if we could update the license of Redis, and if that was compatible with the license that Argo has. And basically we figured out, hey, we're not actually using any of this stuff in our code. We're just having, as part of the deployment, that you reference an external image that's provided by somebody else. It doesn't have to have the same license at all. Now, if people are hosting Argo CD, selling services, selling a hosted Redis, they might care about the license. But if that's not the case, then it's not an issue. And of course, if you want to use something other than Redis with Argo CD, you're welcome to do that. You can replace that image and swap it out with Valkey or any of the other alternatives that are out there. We just haven't been testing for it within the Argo community right now. So the upgrade to Redis 8 is a pretty big deal. It means that we're gonna have a better security posture. Redis 8 is also more performant. And again, if people, we have a lot of people that are using like enterprise Redis, like maybe they're using the replication features or whatever that they're getting out of their paid license. That's fine. They can continue to do that. If you don't like that license, if you want to use an alternative, you can swap that in. And if you'd like to contribute documentation around that or testing facilitation with that in the Argo project, again, it's an open source project. We'd love to have your contributions. But in the meantime, it does look like in Argo CD 3.2 that we will be shipping Redis 8 as the default. So really happy about that. And that was a contribution from Patroklos, who's on the Octopus Deploy team of Argo maintainers, and really appreciate that work, Pat, that you're doing. And that's a big, heavy lift. He also, Pat, I don't know if it's been completed yet, but he's also working on bringing GitOps Engine back into Argo CD. For those of you that don't have the history on Argo CD, there was this effort to split out the core mechanisms of Argo CD into GitOps Engine, which would be available for any kind of GitOps tooling to use. And it was specifically done with the kind of advisement and interest and consent of the team that was working on Flux. And we said, hey, we'll move this work out. A lot of that was done by Alexander M, if you know that maintainer, and he did a lot of the work to move this out into a project that people could use to build their own GitOps tools and operators. And Flux ended up deciding to build their own. They didn't use that one. And we saw from the community that there wasn't a really big uptick of people taking and using this component. And so it's been this extra overhead and burden in managing the project to have it that way. And so Pat is leading the effort to bring that all back into the Argo project. And we're talking about like a history of like, 900 commits or whatever, 1,000 commits on that project, and very, very complex. And to do that in a secure way in an open source setting, that means we basically built a script that does the migration to bring those repos together, and that has to be validated and reviewed. So I don't know if it's in yet, but it was very close to getting done last time I looked at it. So that's cool. So that's the Argo news. So that's segment number one. We're now going to move into a new segment that we're calling Argo tips. Cue sound effect right here. That's where that will go. But Argo tips, weekly Argo tip. So this week we're going to be talking about the most dangerous settings in Argo CD, something that we have seen as a potential pitfall for teams to run into. And that, of course, is something that leads to accidental deletion. And accidental deletion in Argo CD is maybe one of the scariest things that can have that you can have happen. I gave a whole talk about this at ArgoCon last year about I think it was called Whoops or Get Whoops, how not to accidentally delete things in Argo CD. And we went through all the different scenarios of exactly how deletion works in Argo CD and Kubernetes and those interactions, how they work. And so we're going to talk about this setting, and then we'll bring Victor C in, and we'll get into our case study, kind of talking about the experience of adopting Argo CD from 1.0 to now stories from the trenches. So here's the setup. You've got your Argo app configured, and you're moving to automated sync. And when you turn on that automated sync, there are all of these wonderful sync options that you can take advantage of. Things like self-heal. Well, what does self-heal do? Self-heal is going to watch the resources on the cluster, and if something else modifies them, Argo CD will go and re-update them back to what's defined in the source of truth, usually Git. And so if you have like a pod autoscaler running, if you have a pod autoscaler running, it updates that resource of the number of replicas. If you have self-healing turned on, you don't have diffing customization turned on, Argo CD will say, no, Git says it's supposed to be this. I will set it back to that. So self-healing works really, really well. But there are a number of other options with automated sync, and one of them is prune. And prune as an option means that if this resource is removed from Git, it should automatically be deleted by Argo CD. And in general, we really like people to get into the mode where they can use prune, because if resources are deleted in Git, they should be deleted on the cluster. And so this isn't the dangerous setting yet, but when it's combined with another setting, and that is the setting of allow empty, that's where things get a little spicy. So allow empty is a setting in auto synchronization that allows Argo CD to look at the output of repo server. So it's gone and it's grabbed your source of truth, usually from Git, could be an OCI source of truth, and it has run a process to attempt to render those manifests or to output those out, and it has come up with nothing. There's nothing in that output. Well, Argo CD by default will treat that as an aberration, as an error, as something that has gone wrong. And it will basically say like, okay, something weird happened. I got no output from your manifests. I'm not going to do anything until you give me some valid manifests to work with. But allow empty makes it possible that if that resource is removed, if all the resources are removed and the application renders with no manifests at all, then Argo CD can take action with synchronization. And if you have prune turned on, it will automatically delete the resources that are no longer found. And as Christian in the comments says, allow empty is a spicy meatball, because with Argo CD, there are things that can happen that go wrong. Let's say that the network isn't responding very quickly. Let's say that the manifests, there's an error in the caching system where they're supposed to be cached, but they don't. They're actually not cached. The cache is not found. Maybe there's some case where it doesn't find it or something, or maybe there's multiple processes running and they're conflicting on the same cache, something like that. There can be these transient issues where the output may not render properly or may even render empty. And if you have allow empty and prune together turned on, those resources will be deleted automatically by Argo CD. And that is an example of what we would consider, in combination, the most dangerous setting to have in Argo CD. because it means that intermittent failures may lead to accidental deletion. So heads up on that. If you're using those settings, I'm not saying you can't use them. There's a reason that allow empty exists. There are scenarios and cases where people really need that, but you may want to consider that it is potentially dangerous. And I think there are some examples out there on the internet that show those settings enabled without necessarily explaining why it's dangerous. And there actually is, in the documentation of Argo CD, under the allow empty field, there is a notice that basically is a warning that says that this could be an issue and to look out for it. And I think the warning, what does the warning say? I'm going to try to look up what the warning says, but it basically says something like that it's dangerous. I think we actually need to improve it. And I was going to take a work item to try to improve that documentation about how intermittent failures could lead to accidental deletion. So that is a very dangerous setting in Argo CD. And that's your Argo tip of the week. It's a spicy one. Hopefully it'll get some attention because it is the most dangerous setting in Argo CD, using allow empty with prune enabled on automated sync could lead to accidental deletion, and nobody wants to deal with accidental deletion. Now, the great thing about Argo CD and GitOps is easy come, easy go. It works both ways. I just run my sync again, and it's going to recreate those resources. And that's generally, for a lot of issues, it may be a very short-term failure, and it may not be that big of a deal. But if you're dealing with things that have a large cascading impact, then you may want to be extra careful about this. If you're using something like Crossplane, CAPI, Cluster API, if you're using vCluster, as part of this, you might have some sort of cascading failure because of some network issue. There was a hiccup, gamma ray hit the router at the wrong time and it couldn't render the manifest. And so it went ahead and just deleted everything. No, when you resync, it's going to come back, but that may not be a failure condition that you're willing to work with. And another one, and I'll add just a little bonus tip for this week. Another thing to be aware of is the use of replace as being potentially dangerous. You never thought about replace being dangerous, but remember, in Kubernetes, replace is a deletion and a creation. And for most resources, that's not a big deal. If you do that with a pod or a deployment or a config map, it's not a big deal. But any kind of tool, any kind of component in Kubernetes that has any kind of cascading impact, like something that holds an owner reference, for example, if you delete that, then all of the things that were reference to that owner reference will get deleted automatically. Or another one would be CRDs. If you do a replace on a CRD, it's going to automatically delete your custom resources that those are associated with. This is a default Kubernetes behavior. It's not an Argo thing, but that replace operation, because it's available as a sync option, sometimes people will do that manually and lead to accidental cascading deletion when they don't mean to. Christian says doing a replace with a PV or PVC will give you a bad time. Yeah, it totally will. So look out for those things. And by the way, Argo CD has in the RBAC, this is one of the big advantages of 3.0 was more granular RBAC controls in Argo CD. You can limit who can delete what kinds of resources, and might want to spend some time configuring that limit accidental deletion of something like a CRD, of PVCs, that kind of stuff, to prevent cascade failures or getting stuck into a bad position. So that is your Argo tip of the week. I hope that's helpful. If you like the Argo tip of the week, be sure to like and subscribe and tell all your friends about this show because we need it. And, make yourself known in the comments. We'd love to see you there. And without any further ado, Victor, I hope you're ready because I'm going to bring you in. This is Victor C. We're going to be talking about your story. So say hello, Victor.
Hey, hi, everybody. Thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for joining us on the show. Glad to have you, especially this week. I'm down a host. Ruby Tal is out on holiday. I feel like she goes on a lot of holidays. Yeah, I got to say, I don't know if she'll listen to this, but if she does, you got a lot of holidays, Ruby Tal. We need you on the show. I'm just teasing though. But Victor, thanks for joining us. I think this is a really cool place to start the conversation because you started using Argo CD. We just talked about it. It was 5.5 years ago, right around the time Argo CD 1.0 came out in May 2019. This is a pre-CNCF project. This is before it was donated to the CNCF.
That was so. It was funny hearing you kind of talk through all of your tips because I think we've ran through every single problem you could possibly face throughout the entire journey. So all the pre-work, getting onboarded, understanding a project that nobody has seen before, coming off of tools like Flux and Argo, which are essentially the same thing but are completely different all at the same time. And trying to build a full enterprise level product on top of it was all fun.
Like it seems like it should be simple. Hey, it's just watching Git and running a kubectl apply. How complex could it be?
You would think. You
would think it's simple, right?
Yeah. So to give you a little bit of insight and giving your the crowd a little bit of insight. So I work for a company called Veeva. We do life science information and we do big data in life science. And when I first came on board about 6 years ago, one of the first things I wanted to do was everybody has all these ideas and they want to bring in and they want to build a brand new product, an enterprise level product. We're going to bring in dozens of developers. We're going to have PMs. We're going to have this whole launch. Now it's me. It's literally just me, day one. How do we do this? And the first thing that I wanted to do was, okay, we don't even have AWS infrastructure in place. We need to build it from scratch. Well, what the first thing I want to do? I want to make sure that we get Kubernetes involved. That was the first thought. And then I want to bring in something that's going to make my deployments 100% easier. Argo. Right. So it was at the beginning, starting off with Flux or Argo, deciding where we're going to kind of go inside that direction. Argo had this beautiful UI at the beginning and let me see exactly what was happening. So we went with Argo. Try to see how we were going to do. But there was little to no instruction at that point.
Yeah, I imagined. And like even to hear about it, because May 2019 is before we came out with the GitOps principles that really like got people thinking about GitOps as a thing. So that wasn't around. Argo CD had a very, very small community. Flux was still a very, very small community. So do you even remember like how you heard of Argo CD? Like what triggered triggered you to look into it?
So one of the things I try to be as innovative as possible. So I'm always in every single YouTube video that I could possibly find. Argo was this thing that was, you were hearing it everywhere. Nobody necessarily understood how to get it to work 100%. It was, how do you do this at scale? What does it mean? But it seemed to be, from an operations perspective, so much easier. And if I was thinking on how are we going to build a brand new product from scratch, and I don't have any hands, I don't have anybody to build me pipelines, I don't have anybody to do this. How do I get a orchestration system that could do a lot of this for me at scale, and I could just automate the process? Argo kind of popped up, and once I started using it, it flipped right away of the benefit that we could get from there.
Yeah, this is, I mean, Argo CD as a name was about a year old, because before that Argo was just Argo meant workflows. Argo meant Argo workflows, because that was the first thing that was built. And then it was, once Argo CD was released, there was renaming Argo to Argo workflows, introducing Argo CD. Did you have any confusion between the two? Because that's something I've seen from a lot of people where they're like, oh, I want to deploy software. That's something I've done using CI/CD. And they show up on the website and they're like, Argo workflows. Yeah, that looks like CI/CD. So I'll grab that and use that. Did you have any confusion about those, or was it very clear that it was Argo CD?
Not necessarily confusion on Argo CD and Argo workflows, at least when it came to some of the documentation. My confusion is when we actually deployed it. the fact that Argo Workflow was the very first product, and everything is named Argo.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Everything is named Argo, and then we do Argo CD, and all the pods are roughly, pretty much the same naming convention at the beginning. It caused a lot of confusion when we were trying to figure out how to deploy and how do we match and merge both products at the same time.
Because you were using both. You were using workflows as well.
So we started using Argo CD. Argo CD was our work engine. Then we dabbled in, we do big data pipelines. So we had some orchestration tools that we had, and then we wanted to kind of bring in Argo workflows as well as some of our orchestration. And when doing that, that was some of our concerns. The pipelines would clash all the time. The Dockers, we had to put them in different namespaces. And that caused a little bit of issue at the very beginning.
Yeah. Gotcha. Okay. Now, so since you guys have been using it since 1.0, obviously it's been working for you. You're getting value out of it. The team's happy with it. But how has that changed over the last 5.5 years for you? Like 1.0, Argo CD was pretty basic features. Obviously, application sets weren't there yet. That was going to be an Argo Labs project, and it wasn't going to be merged until like version, I don't know, 7 or 8. So it was a ways out. How did you approach solving some of those problems, and how did some of your thinking change over time?
So at the very beginning, if you talk 1.0, again, no documentation, no real anything within. I couldn't just watch a YouTube and figure out how to install this at the time. So we set it up, and one of my biggest concerns was we started hiring a lot of developers. We brought on some other teams, and we were getting to the point where we were building a high-level platform. So we're talking at that point, probably 50 or 60 applications. Now we're past hundreds and hundreds of applications that we have to manage within the same system. But if you talk about the first month of use, we have 50, 60 applications that we have to deploy continuously. How are we going to do this? So one of the first things that I did was really define how we're going to leverage our manifest, our Git manifest for everything. Call it Kate's manifest, but our Git's manifest that will leverage all of this. And we basically built our own application sets within there, leveraging how we do things. We leverage customize very, very heavily as well. And we had application sets before there were application sets. So and then moving into
So wait, how did you do it? Did you use a Helm chart, or did you literally like in your CI just generate additional applications as like a script?
So the way that we actually did it was we had a application layer to our we had an application layer inside our manifest. And those will continuously get updated with the versions of the code. So anytime there was a new Docker, we will update the Docker on the application layer. Then we had an environments layer. Inside those environments, they had references to the applications. So every single time we updated an application, all of the underlying environments would then get updated. So from there, we were able to scale. So if you think about just a typical deployment pattern, right? We have development, we have QA, UAT, staging, production, the whole 9 yards. But now we also have a pattern where we have hundreds and hundreds of applications, and every single developer needs their own dedicated namespace. How do you manage that at scale? For us, it was literally just add another config. It just came out of the box because we were using Argo.
So was it an automated script that was like generating those and updating them?
At that point, we update the higher level application via the CI/CD. So if you could imagine a base image with customize, and customize will say image change to ABC. And then everything underneath it, we have a customize that then references all the top level applications. And if it points to the latest version or to a branch, we have a branching convention as part of our structure, everything would just get updated. Now, it kept everything in sync. So you could pin a version, or you could have the latest version And you could do that at scale for hundreds and hundreds of namespaces for
Wow.
all of our applications. And we had to do it before application sets, which was fun.
Yeah, well, and that pattern, I mean, isn't too different from what I see in a lot of organizations today. Did you migrate that to application sets, or have you just said, hey, it's not broke, don't fix it?
A little bit of both. So we have application sets for certain parts of our application, but you're absolutely right. It works beautifully.
Yeah.
It's not broken, and it would basically do very similar kind of workflows. And at the end of the day, one of the things that was very, very helpful on migrating to Argo, my team had no idea how to use Kubernetes, right, when we first hired them, let alone Argo. The concept of GitOps was new to the industry, let alone to some developers that we were trying to bring on. We got them onboarded, and they understood the concept of Kubernetes very, very quickly because of GitOps. And then we were able to do that. We brought in things like Crossplane as well. So now not only were we doing all of our applications, but also our infrastructure. It was the whole 9 yards, and the developers just kind of got on board very quickly because it was so simple. At the end of the day, it was just a YAML that they had to update.
I think it's one of the big unsung values of Argo CD is how it helps people learn Kubernetes. Because when you're just working with manifests or just a Helm chart, seeing the relationship between how pods and deployments interact with each other, it's so much more obvious when you're looking at Argo CD and you see what's a part of your app and you see like the relationship between things. And you're like, oh, that's what a pod is. That's where this is happening. Oh, and the deployment is doing this. And like, oh, the service is doing that. And like suddenly you can see how everything kind of fits together. Whereas when you have to, like pre-Argo CD, you had to conceptualize it just by looking at the manifests and just trying to like, you had to kind of know, like knowing that pods and deployments are related, right? That's like a very basic conceptual leap for Kubernetes adoption.
But it was very raw for developers. Like,
but yeah, if
like,
you just
why can't I deploy this? What's a config map? It was very
well. And if I'm coming from a VM world and I'm like, I just need something that runs an image with my code on it, so I'll just deploy a pod. Yeah, right.
Yeah,
that would be the most basic corollary. That's what you would deploy, because a pod is the thing that is most like a VM in the Kubernetes world. Like it is a virtual machine, right? And it is running an image. It is running code. I can look at the logs. I can exec into it. It looks like a VM. And if that's what I'm used to, I would just deploy a pod. And you're like, oh no, you got to use a deployment. Like, oh, why do I have to use a deployment? It's like, oh.
And on there, it kind of went in two different directions. We go from a team that had no idea how Kubernetes worked at all, what a pod was, a deployment, a daemon set, none of those, to now we started leveraging a lot more Helm, but also who has to build a Helm? In most teams, you would have an operations team that would come in and build the framework of Helms. Our development teams are now so knowledgeable on what the underlying concepts or what a service, YAML looks like, a deployment YAML. They can now build it themselves or update it and manage it at scale. So now we don't need a large infrastructure team or operations team to take on those components. We could actually spread that work out to the entire organization.
Yeah, this is going back. I'm thinking about 2018, 2016, like what we were talking about as an industry. And it was like shift left, put more into the developers' hands, give them more power, more agency, more choice. And a lot of companies still don't do that. They don't want their developers to even know that Kubernetes is underneath. And I get why on some level, because it's like, okay, they can just focus on writing the code and somebody else is doing the operations, and you have a team with enough resources where somebody can be dedicated to operations. But it's also really difficult to not have that, like, that level of knowledge to be able to fix your own thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. And my background, I was always a full stack engineer. So it was always like, oh, I got to go build the server, and I'm going to deploy VMs, and I'm going to manage that. And then I'm going to set up the dependencies, and I'm going to deploy my code. And that was just out of necessity because I never had anybody around me who was going to do it for me. Yeah. And so I don't know how common that is.
The one concern that I have, if you don't understand the underlying aspects of the Kubernetes and you kind of depend on an operations team, you're really throwing things over the fence a lot of times, because you're not going to as a developer, you're not going to think about how do we build the alerts, how do we do the retry logic in Kubernetes. Those are all application-driven architectures, making sure that we could do multi-pod application patterns and they could scale. Those type of things, if we teach the developer how to do it, and they could deploy it inside their own namespaces continuously, building that framework, they have the knowledge to now build an enterprise level solution from end to end.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you have to get buy-in from the organization to believe you, or was it just, were people just like, oh, that's what he's telling us we got to do, I guess we got to do that? Or did you get a fight from anybody who was like, I don't want our developers doing anything with Kubernetes, I don't want them to know about this? Or developers who were like, I don't care about, give a rip about replica sets, I don't want to give a rip about it?
The cool thing, I mean, the great thing that happened was when I first came on board, we had nothing. And we started building, and then we brought in developers from other teams and brand new developers. They had very little understanding of what Kubernetes and how that stuff worked. But what I did was build it into the platform. So in order to get it into the platform, you needed to understand the manifest. You needed to understand, and we built a framework.
Yeah.
So the way that I kind of like building out operations teams is they are the facilitators. They build the framework around what is needed for the developers, and then you empower the developers to do things on their own. So luckily, I was able to do that from the very beginning. So they kind of bought in, but it was hard. There was many developers. I'm a developer. I'm gonna change the code. Why is this service not working? Why can't I hit it? Yeah, you have to teach them.
I think as the developer, as soon as you see how quickly you can get your code deployed, you're like, oh, okay, well, this is really nice. Because if you come from an organization where it's like, oh, I've got to involve 5 other people, and I got to email people, and I got to do a change log request and get a ServiceNow approval, and blah, 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 and it takes, so the operations team has to take it, and there's a 2-week queue, and there's code freezes. And so, like, for me to see this into production takes a couple of weeks after I submit it. It's really powerful. And we actually did this with, we gave a talk, what was it? Is ArgoCon the second one, the first in-person ArgoCon? We did a keynote with, what's her name? Fanza from Peloton. And by putting Argo CD into their users' hounds, they got their developer onboarding time, because Peloton was onboarding a ton of engineers. They got that down from, it would take on average, I think, like 6 months for people to deploy code. And with Argo CD and having that be part of their onboarding process, they got it down to like 1 week. Yeah. So the developers could write their first change, get it deployed to production within a week, even just to have a place to go and see where the source of truth is for something, right? Like once it's in the application, if you go to Argo CD, you're like, that's the app that I got to update. I can just see where the manifests are and what's being deployed. I already have this picture that is so powerful. Whereas in the old world, even in the VM world, where's the source of this? It's somewhere in CI/CD logs. You got to go dig into those and figure out what the last deployment was, figure out where it was checked out from, go modify that thing. It's like you got to be Sherlock Holmes to figure out how you should even be deploying. And Argo CD just gives you like the very clear picture of everything that's happening. So you don't have any guesswork. You don't have to do any detective work to figure out how to make changes. You
could imagine back in the day having a Jenkins pipeline and then that getting deployed and having scripts to do things. Everything was very different on how things were deployed. Now it's very standardized, very approachable. Our development team now, we deploy new applications probably every 2 weeks or something like that. And we have a brand new application that goes out with little to no communication with the operations team. They have a framework in place. They are able to develop it. We get it all through all the different environments with exactly the same pattern. And then we understand not only that the code work, but the infrastructure around it. We have the S3 bucket, the IAM roles, the SQS queues, whatever my need for that application. And that then moved through every single environment because it's just a manifest that we copy. Yeah. And our deployment has been extremely easy. At the end of the day, it's just a PR.
Yeah.
You press the button and boom, we're in prod.
Did you come from that Jenkins world before?
From before, yeah. So we had Jenkins, very difficult kind of workflow, leveraging tools like CodeFresh, which were very Kubernetes centric,
Yeah.
extremely
For,
cheap.
for CI, you were using it for CI, right?
Correct. Correct. That changed the frame for me and how we would do things and how simple that infrastructure was. And then having that tied back into our manifest and having GitOps to actually be the CD aspect of the continuous CD aspect not only allowed us to deploy very fast, but also gave me the confidence to understand that we do leverage prune and we do leverage self-heal.
Yeah.
That all of our environments are always in sync with what we think truth is.
Fantastic. But probably not allow empty with
No,
prune.
no. And I have some stories on that as well. We've
Oh, do you? You have an accidental deletion story?
Oh, we've actually deleted a lot on our side. So we've gone through and Argo has not always had all the functionality that we needed. So we would go in and try to customize ourselves. And we have put in code that would put in a manifest and manipulate manifest. And in those manifests, we have
in repo server.
Yes, as sidecars to repo servers.
Okay, all right.
And we have,
and this is before config management plugins, where it was like,
correct.
Here's the correct. Yeah, okay, all right.
And we have put in empty values, which if you consider that with something like a crossplane, where we could delete every single IAM role that ever existed, or S3 bucket that has data, you could see how this could go very, very wrong. Luckily, we add protections to not delete if something has data inside of it, or we have protections in place. But you could see very quickly we could delete every single IAM role for an entire account.
I mean that's the value of GitOps, right? Is like I can create all this stuff with a commit and I can delete it all in a commit, but also it means that like you have a high burden to make sure that configuration is really well tuned and reliable.
But luckily, as much as we've had issues, you're absolutely correct. The other aspect of it is you press a button and you have everything back up in place. You don't have to.
Yeah.
I've been inside the worlds where you're doing late nights trying to figure things out. The burden of issues and having to have on calls has almost completely been gone because we have such a system that is just self-healing.
Yeah, there might be a joke there about like the junior engineer comes into a broken Argo app and they go through the documentation and they start looking at like the Go routines and they're reviewing the logs, and the senior engineer comes in and just nukes it and resyncs it. It's like you want to understand why the failure happened, like we all do for sure, but like sometimes it's like, I don't know, man, just resync it and it'll fix everything and we'll be back in business.
I'm more than that type of person. I'm very cattle shape. Kill it all, start it all from scratch. Yeah. We should get it all back. If it happens again, let's go dig a little deeper. Sometimes we have intermittent failures. But if you can't delete it all and bring it back, something was wrong with our design in the first place that we got to go back to.
I had an issue one time with my home lab where the synchronization was failing because the Kubernetes API was overloaded. And it was like trying to fix it the like GitOps way actually was kind of difficult because there wasn't enough responsiveness from the APIs. Like there weren't enough resources for it to do its job. So like trying to get it back into state from that was actually really difficult. And I ended up having to, I like backed up the whole cluster. And then I think I had to like just do like a hard install upgrade on and add new nodes and do this whole, rigmarole to get it back into like the right proper state. And then I was able to like move it back into normal GitOps operation. And if you're working with, cloud resources, I would have just spun up a new cluster, deployed everything there with, enough resources and then just, move the traffic over and shut down the old one. But because it was home lab, you got to like, I don't have another cluster. if I got to add nodes, I have to like go to the store and buy some nodes to bring back and plug in. I got to configure those and, go through that process. So
I've went through and I have my own home labs and I have also set up everything with Argo. It's made life like you do it in production, you understand the
Yeah.
benefit of the simplicity of the deployments, not having to do a kubectl apply or kubectl here and there, and just putting a manifest inside one place and understanding that it's going to just work.
Yeah.
And it kind of drives a whole different mindset of deployment.
Yeah, makes a big difference. So with your teams, have you had any other like horror stories of so we
Uh,
covered like accidental deletion, any cases where like a developer was maybe a little too empowered, or maybe the configuration wasn't fully thought through before it was run out, or a new feature or an
yeah,
upgrade maybe triggered something?
I don't know if we have enough time. No, but the one of the things that we did was separate the manifest that controls production versus the manifest that controls all the lower environments. That was
Yeah.
a big issue for me. I wanted to
So
make
were you
sure
using the single manifest to deploy to all of them? So
no,
all the
so
apps were put in the same place?
we
Okay.
separated the manifest, and not because we couldn't just do code owners or something like that and control it, but I wanted to have a very, from a compliance perspective, have a very clear distinction of who touches what, how
Yeah.
we're going to be deployed, and make sure things are isolated. The one of the things that we did once we moved over to Helm, and we deploy, we could have any one namespace could have several hundred applications, and they could all change every single time we deploy. We probably deploy 60 to 70 apps per week.
Okay.
So it's continuous. Now those Helm charts all have to be downloaded, and that became an issue for Argo. And we've ran into a lot of issues where we started timing out. The
Mm,
manifest became too large because at the end of
yeah.
the day, Argo needs to be able to pull them.
Manifest generation timeout. Yeah.
Yeah, so that became a huge issue. We went very heavily into our own operators. We use a lot of operators. The operations team actually just builds custom operators, and the development teams as well. And we built fixes around a lot of things, but now literally everything. Anytime we have to update databases or our infrastructure or make configurations to our applications, we drive it through GitOps
Mm,
for those methods. So it has limited the amount of failures that we could have, but it doesn't. It also empowers our developers to make mistakes.
yeah.
So we have shut things down. The great part is what we mentioned before. You could destroy the world, but you could also recreate it.
Yeah.
So we've had plenty of issues where we've made plenty of mistakes, but luckily we have the Git commits that we could just roll back and roll forward and just have everything come back up.
Yeah, and there's a lot of habits and best practices that put you into that state where you can recover quickly. Like, for example, if people are not using sorry, if people are not using proper versioning. So for example, if they're using like a latest tag, and now I can't do a git revert because it doesn't point me at a different tag than what's currently deployed. I don't even know what was deployed before. Things like that, where I do think sometimes people who are early into GitOps will have a bunch of these things that they're doing that they don't realize are a problem. And they're like, I don't know if I'm getting value out of this. And you're like, well, yeah, you gotta version your manifest. If you have floating tags sitting in there and you're not versioning your manifest, you don't have a way of doing like a git revert or on a commit. It's
Exactly.
gonna be a lot harder to undo stuff. You don't even know what your state was. Like you're not even doing GitOps enough to get value out of it.
And I would want to say that I was smart enough to not have to deal with any of those issues, but we had exactly the same problems. One of the reasons for having that application layer and having the updates is because if we were to just define the tag change, even if they were changed, like they actually had a version, but they were versioned exactly the same, unless you have replace in Kubernetes, and the Docker's already downloaded to that Kubernetes node, it won't update that version. So we need a pattern that will continuously update the versions for every single change. You can't have latest tag, or you can't have a branch level tag where the branch level is named master or whatever it may be, and then continuously update it, because unless you define Kubernetes correctly, you're going to be at an older version on your Kubernetes. And
Yeah.
then you're going to you deploy, you think something is wrong, and it's because you just never actually updated your code. And you're right,
Yeah.
that's not GitOps at that point.
Yeah. Well, that's like people will update the config map or something, and they'll be like, "I updated the config map. Like, why aren't these settings updated?" And it's like because they
That has
haven't.
nothing to do with.
They didn't restart the pod, guys. Like, you have
Yeah.
to have a step to do that. You have to make a decision about that, and same thing with like secrets, like any of those kind of external references that people maybe forget that need to restart. Yeah, so it's a pretty cool journey. What's maybe your favorite update to Argo CD? Do you have something that stands out as like a favorite feature that when it landed, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad this is here now. This is going to change our world.
A little bit of again, I've been in having nothing to having the world at this point. Like Argo, you guys have built something amazing within the industry, but honestly, just having the ability to do authentication in different patterns was a life changer. When we first got on board, you could only have admin. Like there wasn't really much authentication patterns.
Yeah, you could I think you could dump users into like the config map.
Yeah.
In the Argo CDCM, you could like dump some users into there. Was like,
and even then, they weren't able to do like really distinct roles or anything like that.
yeah,
So
there wasn't that RBAC. Okay, yeah.
So just having the ability to be able to limit certain aspect of things was big for us.
So is it single? Are you like moving to single sign-on with RBAC was like a pretty big game changer?
So that was one of them. Leveraging CodeFresh again was huge on that aspect. You guys integrated directly with Argo from a UI perspective. Before we had to give everyone Argo credentials, and we host everything ourselves. So we had Argo credentials, and we had to manage multiple different environments. We have multiple different Argos. We have 10 or so different Argos, and that was a hassle. Now everyone kind of centralizes in a centralized place and is able to see it.
Argo CD control plane now available in codefresh.io. Yeah, thanks for the shout out. Yeah, that is something that makes a big impact. When like someone told me one time, they said, I don't have any problem spinning up new Argo instances, but I have a big problem getting developers to use the right one. And that's kind of where the control plane came from. So that's a very common issue. And even if like Argo CD can scale like crazy, but there are a million reasons to have more Argo instances. You know, like limiting blast radius is a big one. Networking boundaries is a big one. Needing to work with like a different, maybe you have like compliance issues where you have like certain customers need to have different isolation going on. It makes a pretty big deal, pretty big impact to have more.
And we didn't know, again, when we first started, Argo was new, so we didn't really understand. We went the multi-Argo route to limit the blast radius, to have a upgrade pattern. We were upgrading continuously. Argo updates very often, and making sure that we didn't have any breaking changes at the beginning. You know, it's the beginning. We're gonna have breaking changes, so understanding how we're going to upgrade all the way to production was a big thing for us. So not having, I think nowadays you could go into the hub and spoke model. It's a lot easier to have that type of model, but for us, we kind of limited our blast radius by having every individual environment to have their own Kubernetes, their own Argo.
Yeah, but what a big victory. And like you mentioned, a namespace for every developer as well. Like creating those isolation layers end up being so empowering for people to be able to make changes and test things out and validate things and move forward. Do you get any pushback from finance? Because that's maybe a lot of infrastructure, a lot of costs. Do you get paying to like, hey, how many of these environments do we need? Is there a big
yes, all the time. But you have to balance out the work and the cost of the infrastructure. Yes. Does it cost more to spin up an additional X number of nodes for all the pods? Yes, but now the developer has the ability to self-isolate and continuously work very quickly without having to impede any other developer. So now the speed of delivery is so much faster. Versus, yes, we could get a shared environment. Yes, we could reduce the cost, but now he's going to take twice as long because now we're waiting for a feature from another developer or they have to compete for time.
Oh yeah, and there's such a cost to engineering time is very expensive because obviously they have a high salary, but also if you waste their time, they don't really want to work for you anymore. So your churn goes up. They want to go work somewhere else that has their operations together. They know how to do it. So you hit another piece of churn on that's very costly. And then every feature that you deploy has an economic value. You're deploying something that is going to make your company more successful. You're going to be able to compete better. You have a feature that unlocks, the sales team can now sell this thing, whatever it is. If it doesn't have a monetary value, you probably shouldn't even be working on it. Like there should be some link to like how it's going to make the company more money. So if you can start shipping, a week faster, 2 weeks faster, then we're talking about potentially for a company millions of dollars of impact of opportunity costs that they're no longer gonna have to pay because they can get those changes out more quickly. That's a big trajectory change for a company. And you stack that up over a couple of years, and we're talking about the difference between a unicorn and a fun stay-at-home side project.
And allowing the developers to make mistakes. Like if you have the ability to just keep deploying into your own namespace.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily understand how a deployment works, but now with your own namespace, you start understanding what that YAML looks like. You could make changes and break it and understand. And now you're isolated inside your own realm. You're not breaking anybody else, but now you're starting to learn without having to impact the rest of the development team or any other aspect of the business.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So, all right, Victor, we've talked around quite a bit of your experience. We've got some great stories from the trenches. For Argo practitioners, I think there's a lot in here that they can learn from and get experience from. As we come to the last couple of minutes of our show, do you have any piece of advice that you'd give to teams that are maybe new to their adoption of Argo or maturing in their adoption of Argo CD?
The one thing that I would do is try. So if you're starting to bring in Argo, so you have two aspects. One, you don't necessarily have a great CI/CD system and you're trying to bring it into the company, or you already have a CI/CD system that is already kind of embedded and you want to build in something like an Argo for a GitOps method. What I would do is start putting in some small repos and understanding what that flow would look like. You will see the benefit right away. The moment that you have a manifest that you commit to and it's constantly updating, you could show the benefit, and the seeing of that benefit of the continuous deploy, not only will developers kind of see, and also higher level ups also understand the benefit of the continuous deploy method. But once you could see that and play around with it and use it, it's very easy to now get other parts of the team involved to help you push that within the company. If you make the life easier for developers, they're going to advocate for you. And now you can start bringing in something that could then make your life easier and just make the company better.
Okay, so with Argo CD, start small and let the value become readily apparent, and that will generate all of the political capital you need for the rest of the organization to adopt it.
Absolutely.
Great advice. Okay. Thank you, Victor, for joining us for this episode of Argo Unpacked. And thank you to our whole audience, those of you that are watching live on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitch, on X, on LinkedIn. Gosh, we got a lot of streaming channels. And then all the people that are watching the recording and listening to this, we really appreciate you. Again, be sure to like, subscribe, share this podcast with anybody that you think can get value out of it. Send us your notes if you have ideas for future episodes, things you'd like to see. If you think you've got a great story, if you think your listeners, you're saying, Victor, those horror stories were minor. I've got something that can really scare you. We're coming up on October. We need some good Halloween content to get the scare into these sysadmins. So maybe next time on Argo Unpacked, we'll talk about that. I think our next show, let's see, I should tell you what it is. It's going to be October 6th. And we have the other Victor coming. Victor Farsick is going to be with us. We'll be talking. We're going to get into the culture of GitOps. We're going to talk about some AI stuff. So it'll be a fun episode. But Victor, thank you for joining us on Argo Unpacked, and hopefully we'll see you again soon. Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.